Okay, folks, I was looking at an article that was on CNN, and our title of the article is called What Unity Really Means in America. This was put out on January 19th, and it's by Erin Keith, a black woman who writes, I was still in elementary school, pledging my allegiance to our flag each morning when I first heard the divisive N-word used as a racial slur. Now, I don't care about anything else in the article. I want to focus on this particular sentence right here. I was still in elementary school when I first heard the divisive N-word used as a racial slur. Now, I found that sentence very interesting and very affirming of my own views on the N-word, because you'll notice that she doesn't say, I first heard the N-word used as a divisive racial slur. She doesn't say, I first heard the N-word used as a racial slur to be divisive. She says, I first heard the divisive N-word. The divisive N-word, as if the word itself is divisive. And it is. It is a dividing word. It is a dividing word no matter how it's used. No matter whether it's used in a positive way or in a negative way. Because, of course, the standard idea about the N-word today is that, well, it's positive if black people use it, and it's negative if white people use it, or if people of any other race use it. But it's a divisive word no matter what, even when black people use it. And you kind of see that whenever you hear the protests when white people complain about the use of the N-word. There are black people out there who will actually say, and it's just amazing to see it, can't you all just let us have this one word? And I've always looked at those kinds of complaints and thought to myself, well, what is it that you're wanting the word for? Because it sounds to me like you're wanting the word so that you can have something saying, I'm not like you. You're different. I'm different. There's a substantive difference between us. Which is exactly the kind of thing that racists think, isn't it? I mean, racists are people who think, based on that person's genetic lineage, based on that person's ethnic difference from me, I can make judgments about that person. I can say things about that person and just know from that person's ethnicity or genetic lineage what that person is like, what that person cares about, what that person thinks. And you see this kind of thinking come up in the use of the word. I remember I had a black coworker where I used to work, and he and I were discussing politics. And there was one point at which he was saying, he's like, well, people in general do such and such and such. And then this black coworker of mine said, but N-words, they, and I was just like, oh my gosh, if I said something like that, I'd be run into HR on a rail and then run out of the company on a rail. But he gets away with being able to say that and making a generalization all about people who looked like him using that word. Using that word as a divisive word to say, dividing out people who look like me into a group, a substantive group that I can talk about in generalizations. What is that other than racism, really? I mean, that's kind of a self-directed racism at that point, but it's a racism nonetheless. And it's funny because you see that a lot in black comedy as well. I was going to watch this special called The Original Kings of Comedy. And it wound up being just a little bit too lewd and crude for me. But the other thing that it was a little too racist for me. And this is something that I never noticed growing up. Because I'd watched some black comedians growing up. But I had never, and I'd seen this, but I guess it's because I had watched them interspersed with white comedians. I had never just watched a show that was exclusively black comedians. But there were a whole lot of jokes in these black comedians' routines. You had Steve Harvey, you had Cedric the Entertainer, you had Bernie Mac, you had there was somebody else in the group too, and I don't remember who. But these four black comedians were all talking about differences between white people and black people. It was like this was a staple of black comedy in general, to separate out, to be divisive and say this group of people acts like this and this group of people acts like that. And no, and yeah, I'm not speaking anything to the truth of those generalizations, because you talk about cultural stereotypes. Stereotypes are generally built on the fact that you've got a lot of people behaving in the same way, that you want to just be able to condense it all down and make a stereotype out of it. I think there was one of my favorite movies of all time is Up in the Air with George Clooney, and said one of the lines in that movie is, "Yeah, I stereotype. It's quicker." So, so the whole idea of division, of course, the N-word was flying around in those black comedy routines too, and it all takes me back. This is going to be the weirdest wrap-up, but it all takes me back to this time I was at IHOP. I was at IHOP, and I was reading a book, and I was eating late at night, and in the table next to me, there were seated 3 black men and a white woman, and I think the white woman was probably a girlfriend of one of the black men. And the N-word was just flying around. The N-word was just flying around, but not from her. She wasn't saying it. And I'm thinking, you're probably dating one of these guys. These are all your friends, good friends, and there is this word flying around constantly that reminds you you're different. You're not one of us. And it made me wonder, what is it like to be made to feel like that over and over and over again? That you're not one of us. Don't you dare try to be one of us because of the consequences of a white person using the N-word. And I think that's part of the jealousy over the N-word that is in the black community too. They see a white person using it and they're like, wait a minute, that's one of our avenues of power over you, is that we can say that word and we can punish you if you say that word. But if it becomes part of your common parlance and we let that go, then we've lost power over you. I think there's a dynamic like that going there. But what I'm thinking is those kinds of power dynamics in either direction, whether it's verbal or on site or just generally ascribed from whatever direction, those all need to go away. Because anti-racism at its core has to be about getting people to see people as people. I know there's a different anti-racism version that's going around right now that's saying, oh, well, anti-racism is definitely looking at this group as a particular race, as a particular separate, divided out group of people, and then comparing their needs and their resources and trying to equalize them with this other divided out group. I mean, there's this anti-racism thing that's going on that basically says we need to be racist, and we need to be racist in ways that are good towards particular races. It's like anti-racist by being racist. It's some of the craziest stuff I've ever heard. Whereas real anti-racism would be, you don't look at people by race. You look at people according to how they actually act, how they actually behave, whether they are good people or not. And not judging them by external characteristics like, how they present themselves, how their accent is, how their just various ways they walk, ways they talk. Those are all the superficial things. Because you can make those kinds of judgments about people that have nothing to do with race. There are people who, I know one person who sounds dumb like a sack of hammers, but this is the kind of guy who just reads highly elevated literature for fun that I don't even grasp. I know one guy who's just brilliant at his job, and he sounds like Forrest Gump. I mean, people like that exist, and you can't judge people like that. You know, you don't want to look at somebody who is like a dark-skinned Mexican guy and saying, you know, oh, well, you know, that's the kind of guy I see on a lawnmower, but, you know, he's in a business suit, he's in sales. Wow, that's weird. Well, it may be out of type, it may be breaking a stereotype that you've built up in your mind, but that's something you have to break down. That's something you have to throw away. If you know that stereotype's there and you realize it by seeing somebody who doesn't fit the mold, you have to realize the mold is wrong. But words like the N-word reinforce the idea that the word is right, that the mold is right. That it is okay to classify people, and that it is okay to see other people as not you. Whether it's white people using the word to look at black people and saying, you're not me, or whether it's black people using the word to look at white people and saying, you're not me, and don't you dare try to be like me, which is the whole idea of cultural appropriation, by the way. You know, stop taking what's mine. You know, this is mine. This isn't something that belongs to people. This is something that belongs to my group. And so I'm really thankful to this particular writer for bringing that idea that the N-word is divisive in and of itself. Whether she considers that a positive divisiveness, which I don't even think exists. I don't think it's positive at all for people to divide out like that. Or negative divisiveness like using it as a racial slur. I think it's a racial slur no matter how it's used, frankly, because that's the kind of, you know, making it into a racial generalization and saying that it's okay to racially generalize, that makes it a slur in and of itself. And I don't know, and maybe in the comments somebody could provide this for me, I don't know of words that other people of other races use to describe themselves that parallels the use of the N-word in black culture. I don't know of any words that are derogatory outside but positive inside. Does that even exist? Because I always thought that even in the case of, you know, like Italian swear words that refer in group, and I'm not going to say them because of course I can't, but, you know, Jews who are often called various derogative things, I don't think Jews go around calling themselves that. I don't think Italians go around calling themselves that unless they're trying to be derogatory. And if that's, I mean, if black people are using that in the same sense as that would have to be, then my gosh, how is that not a constant self-put down the whole time? It's not an elevating word. It's not an elevating word no matter who says it. And it makes me wonder about the psychological damage that the word itself just does to be so prevalent. I remember listening to a Jay-Z song, and Jay-Z, of course, he's got the word, you know, out throughout his music, I think, but there was one song in particular where it was all throughout the chorus, and it was like different kinds of N-words, and then, you know, summing it all up with the declaration, still N-words. And I'm just looking at that and saying, my God, you know, imagine reciting that. Imagine thinking that of yourself constantly instead of thinking things that would elevate you. This word is not a good word. And just as a thought exercise, whether you're white, black, whatever race you are, imagine a world where this word is not used at all. And you know it's possible to do because there are whole segments of the population who don't use it. You know it's possible to do even in music, even in black hip-hop music, because you've got the occasional white rappers who obviously aren't going to be using that word, and some of them have been successful. This world can happen, this N-wordless world, where we're not looking at each other by race, signaling each other out by race, making each other different by race, being divisive with that word by race. That world is possible. But it's got to start with you. And it's got to start with you, and it's got to start with your intolerance for the word in general. It's not something that I think can be imposed from without. But if we can register our disapproval with it and say, look, don't use it around me, don't use it to refer to me, even if it's in a positive way, then maybe we can get rid of it. And maybe with that linguistic border broken down, there is a better chance for harmony and equity in these United States. Okay, I'm Mike Partika, and I hope you will subscribe so that you can get future videos like this in your inbox. And I will talk to you later.